The plating was about to fail. There's viscosity throughout the gel layer. Optics, totally fried. And let's not even talk about the power supply. You know how expensive this gear is, son?
I don't think anyone really knows.
I'll have a crack at it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today we're tackling probably one of the most recurring questions in the Halo lore. Just how expensive is a suit of Mjolnir armor? Now let's lay the groundwork straight away. It's very, very difficult to make a clear and concise comparison between how much it would cost in our modern day dollars versus how much it actually costs in the Halo universe. There are some clear fundamental differences between our reality and the Halo universe, even if we share a history, that make settling on an exact figure extraordinarily difficult. We are dealing with human civilization 500 years in the future. And while yes, we can put some conservative estimates on other things that were built 500 years in our past, but that's because we know the currency, we know the cost of labour at the time, we know the cost and rarity of materials at the time, so we can make some very educated guesses on exactly how much things that were built 500 years ago in the past costed. But of course, 500 years in the future, we can't predict that, we can't account for that. It's too far in the future with too many variables involved. Very simple things like the rarity of certain materials that are required to build something like Mjolnir powered assault armor. Other things like the cost of labour, even the economic and financial system. We're dealing with the Halo universe, the UNSC, and humanity who deal with credits, which we have no real way to track exactly how much a credit is worth in our modern day financial system. Yes, credits are also seemingly the in-game currency for buying things in the store in Halo Infinite, and we can of course assign a monetary value to those, but can we consider the credits used in the in-game store as canon? Well, strictly speaking, yes, we can. It's actually been a thing since 343 took over Halo, and particularly starting around the time of Halo 4, the multiplayer of Halo is canon. And since the store in Halo Infinite is somewhat of an extension to your multiplayer character and armor upgrades and customization, it kind of can be considered as something that's in the lore. So that's good because it at least gives us a basis of conversion between credits to modern day currency. But if you think that's the long and short of our problems here, it's not. I have posited in many of my most detailed breakdowns of Mjolnir powered assault armor that the alloy in question, that the armor plates alone of Mjolnir powered assault armor are made of, is a fairly rare isotope of titanium known as titanium 50, and a very specific grade being that of grade 38, as this most closely matches the in-game characteristics and materials properties of the armor plating itself. Now, interestingly enough, we can put an actual value on a half ton of this material. Titanium grade 38 is approximately $300 per kilo in our current economic climate, meaning in order to purchase 500 kilograms or a half metric ton of this material would cost $150,000. So we'll make a note of that, but in the Halo universe, Reach is a titanium-rich planet, and titanium is significantly more common and more prevalent in manufacturing in the Halo universe than it is in our current real-world universe. And of course, supply and demand heavily informs the cost of products. If the market is oversaturated with a certain material or product, the product price goes down. If demand increases and the product becomes more rare, the price goes up. I'm not going to use this to muddy the water and make this any more complicated than it needs to be. I'm just letting you know that we can put a figure on the final price, just not a precise figure, and there are huge variables involved. But nevertheless, we'll draw the line $150,000 for a half ton of grade 38 titanium. Now that's all well and good, but of course this raw material has to be machined and engineered and refined into the finished armor plating that we're so familiar with. And therein lies another one of our problems. If this raw material was to be put through our modern day engineering processes, through machines and manufacturing and processing, that comes with a hefty price tag. in this circumstance, I can actually use hard-earned wisdom here, in the fact that I've actually built a real-life MJOLNIR helmet made of titanium. And were it not for our sponsors practically footing the bill for that, just the shell alone of the helmet would have cost just shy of $19,000. Of course, this is including both the material costs, but also the process in which it was created, and in this particular case was created by a direct metal laser sintering printer, which uses a powdered alloy and an extremely powerful laser to selectively melt the powder into hardened metal layer by layer. This is a process known as additive manufacturing. In additive manufacturing, there is negligible waste, basically the ultimate example of lean manufacturing. With reductive manufacturing, or conventional manufacturing on machines, a large block of metal is cut by tools, and every single cut generates waste material that is just discarded, although with every cut that adds value to the finished product. But again, depending on the material, the waste comes at immense cost. Additive manufacturing is useful because there is basically no waste. When my helmet was created, it was lasered into a powder bed, and when the process was finished, the laser pulled away and a member of staff basically reached into the powder keg and pulled out a finished helmet. The problem here, however, is that metal 3D printers are decidedly more rare than conventional manufacturing machines, and thus come with a hefty price tag. But 500 years in the future, they may be commonplace, in which case the cost would have proportionally come down. So again, we can't put an exact figure here. That being said, in the Become trailer, if again this can be taken as being canon, we see different components of MJOLNIR being assembled gradually on an assembly line in orbit. One particular component that was being forged here was a forearm plate that was actually made of a molten metallic material that was then pressed into a die, and out of which came the completed plate. This is a form of very futuristic casting, but it's not casting by simply using a molten metal and pouring it into a die. This metal seemingly still had a metallic look, which wouldn't be the case if we were working with molten metal. The metal would be glowing with incandescence, showing that it is hot. This metal is still lustrous and silver to look at, perhaps because it's being controlled with gravitic manipulations and being kept liquid but just above its melting point. But it would still glow with incandescence. It is then channeled into a die, and when the die closes, it's almost like the pressure and temperature of the die is what solidifies the plate into the finished component. I can't put a price tag on this type of manufacture, let alone the fact that it's happening in space, even if space is more accessible and cheaper to get to in the Halo universe 500 years in the future than it is now. The closest comparison I can make is just through conventional casting, where we heat a metal into a molten state and pour them into dies. The problem there is that every single suit of MJOLNIR is tailored to the exact size and dimensions of its intended wearer, which means the casts and dies that would be used to build a Master Chief suit would be very subtly different to the ones used to build Fred's suit. Basically, every Spartan, every suit of every generation will have their own casts, and thus really only ever be used once. There is a huge variation based on the exact technique and materials used in the process of casting a respective material. Particularly in titanium's case, it can be as expensive as $300 per kilogram. We're again looking at another $150,000 price tag just for manufacturing. That drives our cost up to $300,000 just for the armor plates alone. And that's not including the post-processing that these armor plates would go through, alongside paint jobs and whatever else is necessary for the assembly process of the exoskeleton armor plating aspect of MJOLNIR powered assault armor. Again, the Become trailer seems to suggest that this is almost an entirely automated process with minimal oversight by human beings. This again muddies the water on exact costs, because as things become more automated, although the investment cost initially is more expensive, the running costs thereafter are cheaper. And we live in a world where we have artificial intelligence and automation working in tandem, which basically makes almost anything that we wanted to build only as expensive as the raw materials. Assuming the Halo universe works in that same ethos, we can kind of tentatively draw a line under that $300,000 mark. But that's just the armor plates. The titanium nanocomposite bodysuit, which is basically the under armor of Mjolnir powder salt armor and is flexible but also basically bulletproof, is woven into a three-dimensional matrix by molecular tools. Now, we can weave materials now with tools. That's how most of the clothing industry works. However, we're talking about a material here that is three-dimensionally woven with molecular tools. So first and foremost, we're talking about molecular scale engineering. And as far as three-dimensional matrix is concerned, I assume this means that the individual filaments of the titanium nanocomposite is woven three-dimensionally. As in not just the two-dimensional plane that, say, a fabric cloth would be woven, by weaving threads in and out of each other on a loom, but by weaving the threads through numerous layers of other threads in a three-dimensional matrix. This is very complicated stuff. For the sakes of keeping this video under 3 hours, we can actually look at some real-world analogues of the softer inner layers of Mjolnir. And I'll be honest, one of the closest things I can think of is a spacesuit. I mean, think about it. Mjolnir's under armor needs to be ballistic-proof, heat-proof, radiation-proof, has to be able to maintain a pressured environment inside alongside a breathable atmosphere. It has to deal with waste management, it has to actively heat and cool the wearer, it has to be EMP proof. How does this stack up to a modern day EVA suit? Well, basically exactly the same. Modern day EVA suits need to be ballistic proof because an astronaut can come into contact with micro debris in orbit that could strike them at incredible speeds. It needs to keep the wearer either warm or cool depending on where they are in orbit around the Earth. Under the solar radiation of the sun, temperatures can exceed 120 degrees Celsius or 248 degrees Fahrenheit, while in shaded areas the temperature can be minus 100 degrees Celsius or minus 148 degrees Fahrenheit. The suit obviously has to be radiation proof to prevent the astronauts from taking on lethal doses of radiation. It has to be relatively well electromagnetically shielded because otherwise solar radiation could damage the electronic components inside of the suit. It has to, in one way or another, deal with waste products from the astronaut. And it ultimately maintains an internal pressure and breathable atmosphere. This is basically bang in line with Mjolnir, except Mjolnir is substantially more form-fitting, and technologically speaking much more advanced. But with the reduction in costs for materials and for the automation process of actually manufacturing this thing, I believe it's still relatively fair to use the price tag of a spacesuit to inform the cost of the inner layers of Mjolnir powder salt armor. NASA's newest spacesuits, which are still in development and haven't actually even seen service yet, are estimated anywhere between $228 million per suit and something as outlandish as $1 billion per suit. This, I think, is probably a stark overestimation. This is arguably probably quite a stark overestimation for costs versus Mjolnir's softer inner components, considering the savings we've made through materials and automation. But again, even if it matched the price of the spacesuits revealed and used in 1961, we're still talking about costs of between $83 and $122 million in today's money. Suddenly the cost of the armor plating becomes insignificant. Once you add in all the electronics and communication systems, the HUD suite and BIOS, the user interface systems, the brain-computer interface systems, the triply redundant bypass systems, and a smattering of others, we're already probably looking around $125 million. Does it end there? No, it doesn't. In fact, the 4 most expensive components I've purposefully left out until this point. And the reason being is because I literally do not have a figure to put on these. We have only very recently had a break-even event in regards to our nuclear fusion energy production. Yet Mjolnir powder salt armor is powered by a micro-nuclear fusion power plant that is small enough to fit inside the backpack of the suit, and provide enough energy for 15 years of continuous usage. The closest thing we have to this are prototype nuclear fusion power plants that cost anywhere between $2.7 and $9.7 billion. And these things are entire facilities, entire buildings of their own, not something small enough to be carried around inside a backpack. The polymerized lithium niobosine, which is a liquid metal reactive compound, which is used to physically move the armor. It is arranged by microscopic electromagnetic fields to crystallize the amorphous fluid into a hardened geometric construction, facilitating the movement of the suit. This component can only be manufactured in zero gravity, and the chemical precursors and byproducts of refining this material are extraordinarily toxic. The cost of just creating this material, alongside the cost of having to dispose safely of the byproducts, is astronomical, and I can't even begin to calculate exactly how much this would be. I mean, the closest thing we have to that in the real world right now are ferrofluids, which are basically just suspensions of iron filings in an oil. This is nowhere close to polymerized lithium niobosine. Then we have the superconducting memory processing layers that allow a shipborne AI to be carried on board Mjolnir and still process information like it had an entire memory bank facility behind it. We don't have artificial intelligence, and we don't have anything close to crystalline superconducting memory processing layers. A decade or so ago we managed to encode information onto a crystalline substrate, but the reason that hasn't reached the mass market is because it's too goddamn expensive. And finally, the reactive control systems for Mjolnir that actually allow the Spartan to directly interface with the suit and to move as if it's a second skin, we don't have anything like that in our modern technology. The closest thing we have are robots that we can move with surface skin interface sensors that we put on our muscles. And we're still talking thousands of dollars worth of equipment just there. And it doesn't get anywhere close to replicating what Mjolnir Powered Assault Armor can really do. Again, we have analogues to all of these systems, things that do something similar, just nowhere near as effectively. I know this because I've now spent the last 19 years looking into this technology for my real-world Mjolnir Powered Assault Armor build. These 4 components fall squarely into the realms of sci-fi technology, and the second that you bring in sci-fi technology that is so far out and away to what we're currently capable of that it may as well be from an entire alien species, you can basically put any price tag that you want on it. Nuclear fusion is commonplace in the Halo universe with humanity in the 26th century, but there's no other technology that humanity used that take fusion energy and make it as small as being able to be carried inside the backpack of Mjolnir. There is, of course, huge cost associated with the miniaturization of nuclear fusion technology. And as for the other technologies, there's very little in the Halo universe that actually mimics the properties of these materials. The closest thing we really have is the polymerized lithium niobosine, which uses a piezoelectric effect to transform electricity into movement. And that is somewhat reverse engineered from a material that is used in the hulls of UNSC ships, which takes the immense strain and static electrical buildup in the hull plates of the ship and converts it into mechanical or electrical discharge that can be diffused and managed with ease. What's the price tag of that? I don't know. After all of my research, I've managed to boil this down to basically these 4 single components of Mjolnir Powered Assault Armor, which is where everything gets cloudy and we can't really put any hard and fast numbers on anything. We just can't put a price tag on micronuclear fusion power because 1, it isn't highlighted in the Halo universe at all, and 2, we don't have anywhere close to a real-world analogue. Polymerized lithium niobosine, its chemical precursors, its manufacturing processes, and its original inspiration in the hulls of ships have no information associated with it in the lore regarding their price, so we can't draw any conclusions from it. The superconducting memory processing layer of Mjolnir is a super sophisticated sci-fi material that we have no information in the lore about the specifics of, so we can draw no comparisons or conclusions on pricing for that either. And the reactive control systems that allow the Spartans to interface directly with their suits and move as if it's a second skin are not explained or extrapolated in the lore, and thus we have nothing to compare them to. It's these 4 components that are the problem. But as for the price of everything else, I can confidently say $125 million per suit would basically do the trick. How much is that in in-game credits? Well, if you buy in-game, you can buy 1,000 credits for about $10, which means a single credit, is a cent. So 1-to-1 conversion ratio boils down like this. You can buy a suit of MJOLNIR that is ballistically protective, will protect you from the vacuum of space, will give you a breathable atmosphere, will keep you warm or cool, will protect you from radiation and electromagnetic pulses, and have some degree of electronic systems and suites and communication systems inside, but won't be powered, be able to move, be able to be controlled, or have an AI on board for 125 million credits. You basically get a museum piece of MJOLNIR powered assault armor that just doesn't work at all for $125 million. Till such time as there's new law in regards to these 4 primary components that I just can't put an estimation on. That's the best we got. So, until next time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. Big shout out to my patrons, Spartan10148, the metarch of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, Element Zero, Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Keys, Directal, Gunslinger, Jacob, Bandmill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, and Personal Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. It means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Fenrir and Born Stellar, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for I don't fucking know. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos, and consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron or YouTube member to keep the channel alive and kicking. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.